Hello, everyone. I'm Kristen Netopak with the Magic Grove, and you are watching our Friday show, Tea and Magic, where I get to bring on a special guest to talk about magic and everything that's happening in the world when it comes to self-power and self-love and all of those fun things. And I have got yet another amazing guest, a woman who I adore, Joy Donnell, who is the chief visionary of SUPERJOY Media, a cultural and brand strategist and author. She established the Center for Intersectional Media and Entertainment in 2018. And as an international speaker, Joy shares her insight about branding, digital media, storytelling, and representation. And she just published a book that we are going to talk about. If you guys don't have this, it's called Beyond Brand, and it focused on using media and your public image to build cultural legacy, which is going to be a huge topic that we talk about today. So hello, my dear. How are you?
Oh, it's great to see your beautiful face, Kristen. I have missed you.
Oh, I missed you too. And we're great friends. I told you we're great friends. I miss you too. I mean, Joy is one of those humans that we get on the phone for a 5-minute conversation and 4 hours later, we're still talking. Yeah.
And connecting dots and being like, oh, this is the thing that's happening. And oh, this is probably what's going to evolve out of that. And ooh, this is how people are going to wake up to this. And then it happens.
Yeah, there's so much. Well, I just want to start by asking you if you brought your tea, because it is Tea and Magic, and I've always got to talk to my guests about what they're drinking.
I brought my tea. My mug is my Mount St. Mary's University mug. I love it because it's purple, and I guest lecture at Mount St. Mary's University. It's the only all-women's university in Los Angeles. They have campuses near UCLA and USC, and it's also largely women of color. That's the bulk of the population. I guess lecture there, and one of the girls gave me this mug, so I keep it close to me and feel that love and that energy. And they're the next generation. They're part of why I do what I do. And the tea that I'm actually drinking is Charles and Company tea. I don't know if
I love Charles and
Charles and
Company.
Company,
So
right?
good.
I mean, like, this is the creamy Earl Grey, and I've actually I've now used this up. Like, it's over. This bag is over. I haven't. I've done it. I've done all of that. But I also have like some breakfast tea. I have the coconut chamomile. I mean, it's just one of my favorite teas. And the founder, Lawrence Charles, is an absolutely beautiful human being and just has like an amazing entrepreneurial mind. And just, the tea is hand blended, so you can't smell through this too bad.
I know.
you know, but if you go get some, you will see. I don't exaggerate about this tea. Like, it's amazing.
I have some friends that are obsessed with Earl Grey. I think their Earl Grey obsession is legit. I personally can't have a lot of caffeine, but what I love that you said that I try to do, and I know this is what we do, and we're conscious and we're really we're talking about compassion, which we're going to get into today, is supporting brands that care, supporting human beings that care, buying a tea, knowing where it comes from, knowing how it's made, knowing who made it, and really being conscious of the things that we purchase and we consume and making sure that they are benefiting everyone.
That's
Right.
right. And I
And
probably mentioned Charles and Company is a Black-owned tea brand.
yes.
And at one point was the only American tea that I was aware of being served at the British consulate in Los Angeles.
Oh, that's
So
amazing.
if that means anything, like, I have seen British people run across a polo field over this creamy Earl Grey. Okay.
Roll video. No, I wish we had that. You
Okay.
know, in the future, when I've got my team, I'm going to be like, wait, we got that in video, right?
Oh my gosh. I mean, losing their minds would be like, I've got to go get a cup of this tea. I've got to get another cup of this tea. Just amazing. So yeah, it's like the best. And I wasn't an Earl Grey person really until this tea.
Oh, yes. I love that. I've got my favorite mug, a birthday mug that someone made for me. Oh my God. There's a gentleman, an artist named Trevor, who is constantly just sharing amazing illustrations of people. And so he made this for me for my birthday. So there's me as a witch with my cat and my Care Bear. And I was like, I need to have that on a mug. And now it's on a mug. And I was like, you're amazing. He's just always doing free art for people for their birthdays to make them happy, for celebrities, for myself. And so it's one of my favorite mugs. Yeah. And I was like, I'm going to pay you to put that on a mug for me so I can support this art and have this piece forever.
I love that.
So I want to dive in. I know you've done so many interviews about your book, and you guys, this is such an amazing book. Joy, I have your other book. What I love about this is you have a background in branding. You have a background in working with probably mostly luxury brands, also multicultural brands, and helping people create. I think in your earlier years, it was like, how do I help people publicize? How do I help people get out there and be seen? What I love about your work now is it's evolved into, how do I help people create a legacy? And what I really got from reading your book was that a legacy is more than you. It's not what am I leaving so that the world knows who I am. It's how am I changing the world and leaving it in a better place when I pass, when I leave. And I'd love to hear your take on the inspiration for this book and how you hope that you can help change the world by people reading this and leading them into that new direction.
Wow, I think you're the first person that's asked me this question like this, and it's already got all the energy sparkling around my scalp in a different way. So
because I'm telepathically communicating with you. We know this about each other.
Right. It's like, of course, so it would the easiest way for me to start is to say it was culture total that made me start thinking in terms of writing this book. And part of my work and my job, in working with clients, has always been to monitor culture. Like, in order to publicize people, I had to understand how to will this complex, beautiful human being down into messaging that people could quickly glop onto, digest, feel like they know someone, get interested, want to dive in more. And I've been working in this capacity since before we had social media. So I also had to know how to do things the old fashioned way, actually pitching, directly to newspapers and magazines in completely different ways. And we did not have these social media platforms when I got started. And then it evolved into that. And I was able to, adapt very quickly to that. And I just saw social media, when it first got started, I got really excited. I got really excited about it. I was going into big companies, brands that I won't call them out, but basically being like, y'all gotta get on this social media thing. And they were like, what's MySpace? What's the point of that? Like,
MySpace.
Huh? Right. And then everybody saw Tila Tequila get 1 million followers, and they said, wait a minute, what's MySpace? What is this? What are we supposed to be doing with it? And all of a sudden, everybody was, jumping in. And so at that time, I was like, oh, I want to have this bigger conversation about legacy building. But when I was talking about it in public, people were just kind of scratching their head and being like, I don't know what, and I'm thinking in this Walt Whitman Song of Myself type of way, right? Like, what is the verse you want to leave in this world, in this beautiful song that is us? I said, okay, I don't think it's the right time. Let me just kind of be patient. Maybe I'll never write this book. Fast forward about 10 years later, and things are going haywire on social media, right? We're literally seeing people wanting to kill themselves, and because they're not getting the kind of audience that they thought that they would get. There were things that happened, that shooting at YouTube, and then people are posting things that are absolutely mind-boggling to me about how they thought this was a human way to approach storytelling. And at the same time, I'm also building media. I had started, working in media as an entrepreneur, actually building platforms and building audience that way, doing editorials. I was using luxury in particular to open up a bigger social change conversation and decolonize luxury, if you will, in the mindset of that. talking about these brands around the world that were using ancestral skills that had typically been not exonerated, not exalted as luxury. Meanwhile, a luxury brand, a European-based luxury brand could come, take the same concept, spin it out on the runway, and all of a sudden it's haute couture, right? And it was exalted. And it was all these things going on at the same time, as well as my niece, who's now entering college and very socially active. She is that Gen Z, socially active, socially, aware human being, and was organizing, voting, and everything, and in Georgia. Got disappointed by her home state in a way that I don't think she had ever been disappointed before with the governor election, and all that coming together at the same time kind of spoke to me as, oh, it might be time to actually sit down and do this book. I know that was a really long answer.
We love long answers on the show.
It was everything. It was everything. It was culture literally shifting in front of us in a way that it's very difficult to figure out cohesively what's going on, because it's not usually happening cohesively. But I could just tell, because of the work that I do and how much I pay attention to media and storytelling, and how media drives stories, how these stories that we tell through media shape our beliefs, and how these beliefs become our reality, how this media and this storytelling and the things that we believe and the messages and the words that we use and what we call one another to dehumanize or create opposition and division and things like that is all part of these overarching ideologies that are constantly butting against each other. And when I looked at the way that things were going, I said, this is actually the first time that we've had an opportunity to talk about, what do we want our collective human culture to be? What do we want our collective human cultural legacy to be? How do we want to use this powerful medium that we can literally access through our phones? There's no more barrier to entry. How do we want to use this? How do we want to live with a legacy as well as leave a legacy? What do you want this power to actually be? How do you want to, use it to actually further other voices, other insight, other stories, And I think that it's brought us right to where we are now. Now there's a conversation that's going on that I never thought would be going on globally. People are willing to call white supremacy to its face, and realize that this is not about a person or a group. Yeah. This is not as easy as running around looking for who's, burning crosses on lawns and throwing nooses over hanging trees. That this is actually something deeper and more systemic that, stems from how things were founded and created, and never course corrected from that. Right. And then funded and built story around itself, and images and idols and languaging, so that it could continue to protect itself and hide in plain sight. And that is exactly what I mean by cultural legacy. Right? Like, do we want this to be our cultural legacy? Or do we want to now see it for what it is, call it by its name, root it out, start over, build the actual cultural legacy that we want to have collectively, so that we can actually have the future that we all deserve to have as human beings, regardless of the bodies that the life force is displaying itself in.
There are just so many things. There are so many things. I want you all to stop, go back, rewind, and listen to that all over again. I think that is a chunk right there that everyone needs to hear. There were so many things I picked up on. The first is the idea of the human story, that we, since advertising became big, I guess, like the 60s, the 50s, advertisers came in and tried to control the human story. The human story that we have seen in media has always, like you said, been battling ideologies. And a lot of times it is to sell a person, to sell a product, to sell something. And media has been abused in a way to use false information telling people that they're fat so they go buy weight loss products. The list goes on and on. It's not the human story. And so I feel what your book is really getting at, and where I see our future going, is that we have, like you had said, we have this powerful tool. We now need to realize how powerful it is and start telling truths. And the truths right now are not what you want to sell. So it's not about you going out, not you personally, but it's not about you person over there and person over there selling your product and making money and lying to people, because you are actually part of that foundation that was built to, while you're out there making money, all of these people are poor because of the color of their skin. We are now waking up to, and this is the other major point that you said that I absolutely love, is we are waking up to this collective consciousness that we have all these powerful tools. It's not about us. And I think that's what's really hitting people right now, is everyone has lived in a me-centered universe for so long. How much money can I make? How much fame can I get? I want to be an actor because I want to be famous. I want to own company because I want to be rich. How can we transform this community, this world, away from a me-centered universe to think about the collective? And I heard you say that just now with other words, is that not only are we all waking up to, it's not about me, because guess what? If I'm comfortable and that person is not comfortable, like Joy and I go on a walk and Joy gets murdered because of the color of her skin, that's also my responsibility to help change that, because I live in that world too.
I mean, this is even what we have seen with the first thing that set us all down, and this has never happened in the world like this, right? Coronavirus.
Oh, yes.
And all of a sudden, the whole world has had to pause. That's never happened in the 21st century. It didn't even quite happen like that. I don't think, that was not the 19th century. The Spanish flu, like, it wasn't like this. We never had prepared for this. Everyone was paused because, well, nature is still the mama, and she showed us. She sent us to our rooms to think about how we've been acting, right? And so as we were in our rooms thinking about how we've been acting, this whole other thing happened that has been happening. Race has always been happening. But now it actually started to open up the conversation about class, right? And all the me-centric stuff, right? The way that people have been walking around innocent to what's really been going on. So while some people are all like, oh my God, they saw the Ahmaud Arbery and learned about Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, and they saw maybe what even happened with Christian Cooper and Amy Cooper in Central Park. They were like, how can this be? How can this happen? What is this world? Where a whole other portion of people were saying, I've been telling you, I've been saying, right? Like, this wasn't a wake up call. This is the first time you didn't hit snooze in the past 400 years of culture. This has been a thing. And it is classism, using race and the concept of race, the lie that is race, the myth, the construct that is race, as a weapon to decide which bodies can occupy which space and place, right? And we talk about like advertising, but Hollywood itself actually has been guilty of this. Hollywood has never really course corrected what happened with the production code. And the production code actually had anti-miscegenation inside of it. And ironically, today is Loving Day, the anniversary of when the Loving family actually won the Supreme Court case in 1967 to make it legal for people of different races to get married. My husband is white. I would not have been able to marry my husband back in the 60s. If it had not been for this case, I wouldn't have been able to marry my husband when I married him because it was illegal. But here's the thing, and this is what I mean by cultural legacy, thinking bigger with things. Don't just be like, oh wow, okay. So if you want to understand how things are systemic, how these stories move through things and gain energy, the question isn't, well, okay, why did it take so long to or what has happened since the 60s when this got abolished by the Supreme Court? The question is really, why was it illegal in the first place? Who did that? Okay, so it was illegal. So it's been illegal since back during antebellum days. Okay, but wait, why was it illegal back then? Who decided that it was illegal? Where did it start? Why? What was it for? Well, okay, wait. So where did this idea of race come from? Who decided that these bodies can do this and these bodies can't do that? How did that get energy? Those are the questions that disrupt.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And like when the reason why I called the book Beyond Brand was because like you got to start with the question that disrupts. Okay, like you look at what is the perception around this thing? Whose perspective has usually been given the energy with it? If you can disrupt the perception with your perspective, that's how things start to flow differently.
Mm.
It's like, so that's where this energy of that legacy and that messaging and the bigger ways to go about using media, that's how that starts, to find that, okay, where is the disruptive storytelling possible? And once you start doing it, once you start putting this message out, that is a different way to see the thing that has just been status quo living through the system, you start to realize that it's actually not subversive thought. It's actually mainstream thought. And in the mainstream level, I think when push comes to shove, people want a collective humanity. This is why the whole world came out during a pandemic to address this other pandemic that has been going on. The Amish showed up, the Maori showed up, K-pop stands showed up, right? Witches showed up on TikTok. Everybody showed up. Obviously, this is not outlier ideology. This is actually what we want collectively as human beings. And I pay a lot of attention to when I hear people talk about cancel culture. And I always wonder, is it cancel culture, or are you just witnessing culture shift and change and decide that what was okay before is not what it no longer wants, and you are having trouble accepting that?
I think that is exactly what we're seeing right now, is that when you talk about disruption, people have had these lives. It's like, ooh, la, 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 I'm going to go to work. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to go walk my dog in the park, whatever it is. And certain people can do that feeling safe. Certain people can't. And what we're seeing now is, in the past, the media has really driven a lot of what people think. Oh, it's in the news, I believe it. And I think even now with the pandemic, we're seeing there's so many lies. I mean, we have the president that we have. He straight up lies, writes it, and then says he did not say it later. It's becoming so, the lies and the broken systems are becoming so obvious that now we have all this powerful media that was used against us, but now we have TikTok. I mean, I saw all of the riots through TikTok, not on the news, because I was like, wow, this is a person that's in the front line seeing it. They're showing me the reality. They're showing me the truth. And as people are seeing these truths, as we see a man be murdered in front of our eyes because someone got it on their phone, because that was not illegal to do. Maybe 100 years ago, that person would have been killed, taken in and murdered for being a witness. We didn't want to get that information out there. And I feel what we're seeing now, like you said, is that disruption is causing people to see what is already there, but it's also making them realize that they have been turning a blind eye to it. And that is disrupting their inner world. So not
Yes.
only is the outer world in chaos, but as people, I mean, I went through that myself, still going through that. It's like, wow, how am I as a white woman? I have my own oppression with men, but I'm also white. And so I have a lot of privilege as well. I could see both sides. And I went through a lot of that turmoil of thinking, how could I possibly just sit here and ignore this? Why was I not doing something sooner? And I think a lot of people are in that place right now. And what I love that we talked about the other day is that a lot of us are waking up to compassion. Not only is it disruptive on the inside, so we immediately are like, wow, something's going on in me and I have to change. We can talk about that in a minute. But I think many people are like, holy shit. Yeah, it has been happening. And I have been here witnessing it the entire time and not doing anything, which
Yeah.
leads to compassion. And I want you to say this because you said it perfectly, the difference between empathy and compassion. Like, we are now waking up and we are now feeling what's going on. We're so much more sensitive as a human race. We are now feeling what people are feeling, not just seeing it. And so I'd love
Yeah.
for you to dive into that conversation we had about, yes, we're having empathy, but not only empathy, compassion, and the
Right.
difference between the two.
Well, I kind of break it down as there's three different forms of empathy, right? There's sympathy, empathy, and compassion. So sympathy is kind of just usually manifests as pity. Oh, you poor thing. Oh,
Yeah.
oh. I hope that worked out for you. Right. And then empathy is oh, okay, I don't really understand this, but I'm going to at least try to because I since there's stuff going on and I want to understand deeper, like your emotional process. And then compassion is actually when the empathy, you got it immediately. It doesn't even matter if you don't understand all of the intricacy of what has gone on. You recognize that you are seeing something that is completely unjust, that is completely against what human life is supposed to be, and you have to do something about it. It is a active state of being. Okay, it is not a passive empathy. It is not even conspicuous rage. It is actual action, and you become devoted to justice. You do not rest until justice is served somehow. And I would even venture to say this: I don't actually think that, or rather, I think that one of the sad things that people will have to reconcile is that the systems are not broken. The systems are actually working exactly the way that they were designed to work. What has been broken has been the lens through which you view it in your mind. Okay. Innocence has been to the detriment of everyone else who does not get the luxury to be immune and innocent. That's really what the thing has been. Like, that is what privilege is, right? You get to be in a spot where you don't have to think about it. It's
Mm-hmm.
not your issue. You don't see it where you live, in your neighborhood, in your work. You don't deal with it in a way that it is blighting you economically, is blighting your health. It is keeping you from self-actualization and self-determination. So it's not really there. And this is not the first time that every generation in America, white Americans in particular, have had to like wake up to something and be like, oh my God, how did this happen? What is this? This is the same thing that happened around civil rights. This was the thing that happened, this Jim Crow had been going on. My parents were born into Jim Crow. My parents are still alive. They grew up in Jim Crow, North Carolina. Okay, so this was not so forever ago.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
and it was like this wasn't a thing of 300, 200 years ago. This is right now. This was right then. As we said, the Loving case was 1967, and these things have still not been course corrected. The prison industrial complex has replaced enslavement, actual real enslavement, and it was able to do that through the 13th Amendment. The documentary 13th came out years ago, and there are people that are just now seeing it because they looked up anti-racist documentary watch list, right? And now they're actually like paying attention to things. And that's the thing, like, innocence is a form of how it gets to thrive, right? It's like, and this isn't just about racism, this is any kind of injustice, right? That apathy is a way that it will thrive. Indifference, innocence, not wanting to see it, just wanting it to go away versus wanting to do what is necessary to make it stop. That's the difference, right? And it has been designed, the way that it's been thriving, it's been designed to lull people into a situation where they just accept it, or they don't think about it. They're willfully ignorant, or they don't really lean into it. And I get it. I mean, I get it. I had a very amazing education. I was educated the entire time in the United States. And I can off the top of my head name 10 ancient Greek gods, 10 ancient Roman gods. I am not Greek, nor am I Roman descendant. I wonder how many Americans who don't look like me could name 10 ancient African gods that are not Egyptian. I wonder if they have ever thought about the fact that they only even know the Egyptian gods because of the way that the Egyptian mythology and history has been co-opted and brought and connected into Greek and Roman history, right? But I also wonder why they've never wondered. Is it an insane thought to think that my ancestors looked up at the heavens, at the cosmos, and named it? But why is it that I know the solar system based upon Greek and Roman gods? It has not just given you a very narrow lens, it also takes away your natural sense of wonder. And when you talk to a lot of philosophers, one of the things that they say about what makes us human is our innate sense of wonder, right? So where is the wonderment? I speak English. Speak English. We can go to, the people who are Navajo speak English. But the founders of this country, they didn't learn Navajo. They didn't learn Igbo. They had everyone else learn their languages. They said that other people's languages were stupid and primitive. When I say that it's working the way that it was designed to work, it is actually working the way that it was designed to work. It created one class that was perfect, right? The example of life as it's supposed to be, and said everyone else is other. And for me now, like, this work is vitally important right now in terms of how you're using your platform, how you are using your messaging. What are you actually working toward? Are you just centered inside of yourself and what's going on with you? Or are you wanting to lean towards something bigger in terms of human legacy, our human collective, what we want for this planet? Because every single thing that we are talking about has a component that is also connected to class, the environment, right? Justice, housing, education, financial opportunity, entrepreneurship, bank loans, like you name it. There's all these different weird layers to it that, no, is not just random incompetence. If it was just random incompetence, how could it have been thriving globally the way that it has for so long, right? It's like, so that for me is the thing that is the wake up, where you get that call to compassion. Compassion starts to make you say, no, I do not want this. We do not want this. We are going to work toward moving this out. Okay. And it also makes you question why, and how, and examine the multiple layers of how it has been thriving and what it has been doing. It shows you the work that needs to be done, right? This is not just a thing that you can sit around and hope that it will go away. It actually makes you be like, okay, I see this and I do not want this. I know that I can't do everything, but let me figure out what I can do and how I can do it, and what this is going to do, it manifests, how it's going to manifest within my life, right? And that's really what I mean by your cultural legacy. We're leaving documentation of ourselves in a way that no generation ever has. I mean, there's photos all over the place, videos, our videos, other people's videos, right? You know, just everything you can think of, blogs, the books, radios, podcasts, the movies, film, TikTok, everything, the whole thing, right? And my question is just, when you look back on the scope of what you have left, this documentation that you have left of yourself, how you have used this powerful storytelling delivery system that is media, what do you want? What do you want all that documentation? What do you want that legacy to be? How do you want to help move forward the human story, that arc that's leaning toward justice over time and space? How do you want that to manifest? What does that look like to you? And I think that, you know, when you feel the call, it's okay if you don't think you're qualified, because you will become qualified by doing, you know. Because the thing is, like, the qualified aren't necessarily called, it's the called that become qualified through the work, right? And you have to start where you are. You have to start somewhere, you know. And I even look like, for instance, look at how you've been using your platform. Like, you have a whole platform for people actualizing, tapping into their power, the inner power. And to be alive and be in these bodies is to have power.
Yes.
Truly.
You are singing to my heart right now. This is, everyone that watches this show knows that every single episode is about power. And that's what I love, just reflecting back a few things that you said here, because it really is about self-power. This is the moment in time. This is the era, the age of Aquarius, whatever you want to call it, where we all realize how much power we have. And what I appreciate that you just touched on was that people are feigning ignorance. And that is victim mentality, to say, well, I just didn't know. I had no idea, you know, that innocence, that's victim mentality. Where I think people are being disrupted is when they realize that we as human beings have had power this entire time. We could have changed the system at any time, and we chose to continue to do it for whatever reason that is. And I think every single human is now getting a reality check within themselves as to what that reason is. It's different for everyone. Why was I silent? Why did I not change? Why was I making myself a victim so that I could not have the power to go out? Why was I saying I didn't have the power to go out and help? Why was I feeling powerless? And I think a lot of times I love what you said, is the system isn't broken. This system was created to make us feel powerless, but we are not victims. I say this on every single show. No one is a victim. No matter how heinous the crime, no matter how heinous your circumstance, you always have the ability to stand in your power, whatever that looks like. And I feel that that's what people are really going up against right now. They're blaming everything on the outside. And I'm not saying there are no issues, there are. And these are the people that maybe the ones that are viewing it as witnesses, like, oh, you know, the white people, that they're realizing, wow, I had all of this power all along and I didn't use it. Why? And I'm sure a lot of people are looking at their own personal lives now and saying, okay, well, where else have I made myself a victim? Where else have I felt powerless? And now, because I understand, and this is what you said as well, is how can I now step out and find my power? I think that's what everyone is being asked to do right now, however it is, through religion, through magic, whatever route that is. I feel this is waking people up to their purpose, to their soul purpose. It is no coincidence this is a world event. It is no coincidence the pandemic was a world pandemic, because we are creating that major consciousness. I personally believe we are souls that came here for a human experience. And I personally believe that we all came here for this reason. And I feel that every human being is now waking up and discovering what part they have to play in this bigger picture. What's happening right now is the football field. It is the arena that we have to work with. It's not like, how do I go over there and become a lawyer? How do I go over there and become a doctor? No, I got to become a doctor because I need to fight the next pandemic. I need to become a lawyer because I need to fight for social justice.
Even I think self-care, you need to do self-care so that you
Oh
can get up
gosh,
the next
yes.
day and keep doing the stuff that you need to do in this body, right?
Yes.
And I'm also one of those people, I believe in the ancestors, right? And I
We're going
think
to
this
talk
is
about that.
also right, like I think this is also a moment to heal the ancestors,
Mm-hmm.
because some of that fear or that complacency, complicity that and apathy that people have been having might also actually be some generational apathy or some generational fear, right? Like we haven't ever talked about this. I've never really seen a conversation that talked about what all this stuff did to this idea of whiteness. And I say this idea of whiteness because, again, like this is race is a construct. It's only one race, the human race. Jane Elliott has been telling people this. People just discovered Jane Elliott again, but she's been telling this. She was on Oprah forever ago saying this,
Yeah.
so there's only one race, the human race, right? But the way that this thing worked, yeah, it disenfranchised others to enrich this idea of whiteness, but it also made it very clear to anybody who was in that idea of whiteness, if they wanted to step out and actually do what their heart was calling upon them to do, they were going to get punished. And one of the things that I talk a lot about is the actual housing development that happened at the beginning of the 1900s. And this is when like huge farmlands were bought up, parceled out, turned into subdivisions. And people later found out things about Levittstown, but way before Levittstown, like there were these communities that were like, oh, we're going to build, and they advertised themselves. They even put out ads in the paper advertising how they had a restrictive racial covenant in the warranty deed. Okay, so it stated in that the house could never be sold to anyone of African descent, Semitic descent, Asian descent. They've had Mongolian in there, sometimes specifically, and things like that, Native American. So it could never be sold to anyone that wasn't white. But here's the other thing too: the warranty deed also had in there that if a white person who owned the house did decide that they wanted to sell it, they could get sued, have the house taken from them, have to pay damages to the contractor as well as the community, basically end up financially obliterated simply because they did not want to adhere to the standards and practices and policies and procedures that were being placed on everybody around this ideology, right? We don't ever talk about that. What has been the damage of that? The Loving case, was 1967. Were they the first ones that wanted to get this law overturned?
Yeah.
They weren't the first interracial couple. Okay. So what has been this generational damage and these generational myths, the lies of the complacency and the going along with? It's damage. It's brought us to where we are now. And they said, now the question is this a non-negotiable for you? Because it's a non-negotiable for a lot of people. In order to move forward, in order to be able to show up how we're supposed to show up on this planet, we have to stop using all these convoluted things that we're using to keep us from doing the right thing collectively. We've seen, I know that you were not in LA, Kristen, but if you had seen the skies in Los Angeles during the quarantine.
Oh, yeah.
There was a whole mountain range that was visible from my pool that I did not realize you could see until the smog went away.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize how beautiful the skies were in LA. It actually changed the quality of the light for photography. We're not having a conversation yet, though, about what it's going to look like if we open back up and we go right back to how we were. What's that? What are we going to, does that what we want?
Yeah.
No. A lot of businesses realized they didn't need to have that expensive office space. People actually prefer working from home. It saved a lot of money. It saved gas. It saved the wear and tear on the car. It saved the wear and tear on the mind and the commuting, being stuck in traffic for 45 minutes, an hour, the 35 minutes there, 30, having to get up so early so that you can maybe not be stuck in rush hour traffic. All this wear and tear that we've been doing to ourselves, all this stuff that's been keeping people so tired that they just let it go when they have opportunities to use their power. Right? They hear you have these opportunities, but you're so tired from commuting and dealing with all these little stupid things in life. Okay, no, you just wanted to let some things go. I don't think that we can keep going forward like this anymore. We're being shown that we've got to switch the way that we've been going about doing everything that we've been doing on this planet as human beings.
And that is where compassion comes in, right? It's like you said, I love that, the apathy, empathy, compassion, that if we have compassion, like people are like, yes, I care. It's like, yes, but if you really had that compassion, that is you putting yourself in someone else's shoes. That is a Black person. That is a woman. That is someone who's gay or trans. That's also the environment. Like that's the animals, there's the plants, everything around us.
Disabilities. Like, look at how many places still don't have wheelchair access, don't think about disabled bodies at all in the space, even though technically out of all marginalized people, disabled people are the highest so-called minority, right? We have so many disabled people in the United States, and we haven't even thought about architecture for their bodies. We don't accommodate that. This is the stuff that I think are being called upon to think around, and think beyond just branding ourselves and just building a brand and just building something, putting all this life force into just this thing, that the only thing it's supposed to do is be a fiscal entity for your public image, right? That's all that it is. Now, I don't knock brand. I think that brand has place within the way that the system is right now. But to only want to use your life force toward building a brand, and that's where you want to stop, is not necessarily what a lot of people are actually really striving to do. And when I would be in, spaces having speaking engagements, then I would start getting this question about, like, how can I maintain my authenticity while I build my personal brand? And I had to be asked that question 3 times before I started to think through what they actually meant. Because I was flipping about it the first time. I was like, oh, just be authentic. You'll be fine.
Yeah. It's easy.
Girl, just do it. Like, what? But no. I finally got what was being asked. There was some kind of disconnect that a lot of people were having about, in order to build their brand, they had to show up not as themselves, right? They had to make sure that the photos were super, 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 super perfect, right? And not necessarily representative of who they really are. They're having to tweak their beauty even so that they could look this certain way, as if they were not enough already. It was that constant depletion mentality, that you're just not quite enough. You're never really quite there. You got to keep doing this and doing that so that maybe it'll be okay. And so if that means that you have to completely twist who you are in order for that to work, fine, so be it. But when I started talking to people about legacy, those authenticity conversations completely disappeared. When I started talking to people about legacy, I don't even have to define compassion, really. People kind of automatically get it. Okay. Yeah. There's something compassionate naturally within the mindset of wanting to live and leave a legacy that is of benefit collectively. That is a compassionate act right there. That is love. That is about you saying, this is not my life force. It's not just for me to enjoy while I'm on this planet. This is the mentality that gets you from, the planet exists for me. The planet is just here so that I don't go float out into space, right? Like, no.
Right.
But you are also here for the planet.
Yes.
It's a reciprocal situation, right? It's like the planet is here for you and you are here for it. And together there's a symbiosis that's happening. That's the kind of mentality that starts to pop up when you start to think about your legacy, not just your public image, right? Not just the brand that you're building, not just the money that you want to make, but what you want to actually do with the money that's coming in too. How you want the money to benefit, where you need to funnel things so that where there is an equity happening, that can start to be rectified. And it's a much bigger conversation than what is usually going on when people are getting this hyper-pressurization to show up a certain way, right? And be a certain thing and focus all their energy into just this. All I'm saying is your life force doesn't have to only be used that way.
Yes.
It's your life force, you know? You get to decide how you want to use it.
And this is something I believe we touched base on that I think is so important, is that when we're talking about legacy, this whole conversation is about, how do I serve? I came here as a human being to serve humanity. That's why I'm here. That's why all of us are here. Yes, we came to have our own personal human experience as well. But on top of that, the other flip side of that, and I think Meredith is on the call. She's one of my old astrologists. She told me this years ago. She said, yes, everyone comes here for a personal reason, but they also come here for the bigger picture. We cannot all be on our little personal paths doing nothing, doing our own thing. And that's it. Great, cool. I healed myself. I upgraded that little portion. We are all part of this bigger picture. And what's amazing is how many times when we grow up or awaken or whatever you want to call it, do we realize that those two things are tied. Our personal growth is often tied to realizing the power that we have and what we are here to do to serve.
I mean, ding, 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 boop, 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 boop. Like you just said. And this is why, in the book, I talk a lot about self-compassion. Probably my background in publicity made me start looking into that for myself much more, because if you deal with publicity and media, it can very much get you into the mindset of the next, the next, the next, the next, the next. You never rest, you're never present, right? One of the first things I talk about is how my grandmother taught me that there are 7 directions: north, east, south, west, up, down, and here, right? And here is how you even understand all the other directions, yes. Right? Like the body is a bridge. The body is a vessel. The body is part of the journey and the experience, right? Self-compassion was something that I had to actually work on developing within myself. I actually had a lot of self-esteem. I had a lot of self-regard. I did not necessarily have a lot of self-compassion. I did not have high self-compassion. So I took my body for granted, for instance. I did not give it rest when it needed rest. I felt I could just keep moving, keep it working, keep having it submit to my will. Without any, the thought at all about what it needed, how it needed to be cared for by me as the gift that it is, so that it could keep helping me do the things that I need to do.
Yes. And by the way, I want to interject, because I talk about this all the time, this is what I mean when I say toxic, dominant, masculine energy. Yeah. It is the complete lack of self-care, and for what our divine feminine wants, which is in all of us, and just going, and being like, letting this go, not listening to our intuition, not listening to our body. And that is so huge. But
I mean,
continue.
like, just nap. Yes. Sometimes it's just as simple as, can you just nap? Like, it is not, oh my God, what is the mentality around, you can't even give yourself a 15-minute break and like nap? Yeah. No, I had to keep going, so I was just constantly just go, no rest. And then my body set me down one day. And set me down. It just wasn't just a day, it was more like a year. It set me down for an entire year and put me in a situation where I had to just talk to me every day And I realized, oh, I never really thought that, like, I didn't know that self-compassion was really useful in that way. I thought that, like, as long as I was working and moving and doing the stuff, that was self-compassion. But no, those were action items. I was accomplishing things, but I was not really like having a journey with self-compassion. And the thing is, whether you're an activist, an artist, an academic, you become a storyteller, you're into spirituality, whatever it is, self-compassion is key. Like, self-compassion is key, especially when you start to really understand it extremely deeply. Like, self-compassion is what will help you forgive yourself for what you did not know.
Mm-hmm.
Self-compassion is what will help you compel yourself to do better once you do know better. Self-compassion is what will help you not just stay steeped in guilt and shame and anxiety and depression, right? Which will all be things, they're legitimate emotions, and they are things that you need to actually like dive into to some extent and figure out why it's existing that way. Why is your ego having that conversation with you? But they're not necessarily strategies, right? And so you can't just stay there. There's signals. Your self-compassion will help you say, okay, you know what? Yeah, I could have done this and I could have done that. And that I didn't necessarily make the decisions that I would like to make now, but I was also a different version of myself then. And I can now, being the version of me that I am now, with what I know, with the wisdom that I have, with the illumination I am starting to realize, I can move in completely different directions, right? So self-compassion, once you develop it for yourself, it'll actually help you reach out to others. And it's
Mm.
kind of difficult to really show up with true compassion for others when you have not developed self-compassion, when you have not developed compassion for your own human story, your own human journey, your own human saga, the ups and downs and pulls and divides, and the times that your whole worldview was shattered, and the betrayals that you experienced from people who were supposed to love you, and the ways that you had to work through that, and the traumas that you have actually experienced and endured and worked through, and the ways that you've coped, but you haven't necessarily healed, right? The way that you have survived, but you haven't necessarily been thriving. The things that you pushed to the side and acted like they weren't still screaming inside of your body because you just had to focus on trying to get from day to day to day to day to day to day to day. And so that understanding of how difficult it is just to even be in your own body kind of helps you understand, I think, and be more compassionate toward what other people are going through because of the bodies that they
Mm.
occupy. And we just have a system, we have a world, our human world. I don't think the cheetah world necessarily works like this, or like the elephant world works like this, but for some reason the human world often tries to whittle things down to bodies. Again, it's about bodies, and the way that your body looks has a class, this status thing attached to it. It's weird. It's something that seems to be uniquely us.
Yeah,
In that
definitely. My
regard.
cats don't care about that. They're right here,
Right?
right now. Like,
Like,
you got
I don't
black
think
fur, you
that,
got orange fur. We're
right?
good.
Like, I don't think that like the crows are chatting about this, in the trees and whatnot, but some reason this is us. Like, this is something about us. And that self-compassion, that development of self-compassion, that being devoted to self-compassion, that being devoted to actually checking in with yourself, making sure that you're giving yourself the things that you need to stay healthy as you can, and as full as you can, like that, the mental health, the emotional health, that's part of that
Mm-hmm.
self-compassion too. When you are overwhelmed and you need a break, have you gotten to a place where you can reach out to others, the support system that you have around you, and actually say, I'm overwhelmed and I need help and I need a break.
Mm.
I'm gonna slip. I'm gonna fall through the floor. Can you hold me? Like can you help me whatever way that you can? Like I'm recognizing that things are slipping. No, usually the way it shows up is that people completely slip off the cliff, and we see that they've tumbled all the way down to the bottom. And now here's the conversation around what was going on with them for weeks, for months, for years, right? People having nervous breakdowns in front of us, but we don't
Mm-hmm.
realize it until they shave their head and go driving around, like throwing oranges out of the windows and stuff. And now we see that, okay, you really were, I had a feeling you were in distress, but you really were in distress. That self-compassion helps, I think, fuel even the conversation of, okay, I need breaks. Sometimes
Yes.
I need to actually fuel my joy. I need to use the fact that I know what it is to be joyous in my body, to be at home in my body, and to be at peace in my mind as basically an affirmation that human life, regardless of the body in which it is expressing itself, deserves that exact same thing, that everyone
Yes.
deserves this, not just this group over here or that group over there, that we are all collectively deserving of being at home in our bodies and at peace in our minds because of the joyousness of being alive in our own flesh.
There, it is no coincidence that your name is Joy. I love it. There's a few things here, and I let Joy know, and I'm letting you all know we're going to go a bit over time. That's purposeful. So if you want to tune in, you can tune in now or later. We're going to continue the conversation for a little bit. A few things that you'd mentioned there, like when people are a lot of people right now are going through such a hard time. And I think it's really important that we take that seriously. Mental health and wellness is such a big thing. It's such a big issue that things we have not taken seriously before. And now everyone's going through a mass awakening. Even those of us that are awake are going through a whole new level. So if that is you, please please invest or take the time and energy to find a professional to work with. I think sometimes too, when all of us are going through this, we look to our friends and we feel alone, but our friends are also going through this as well. Like I know I try so hard to hold space for a lot of people. And there are days when it's like, I can't right now. And that's okay. So it's okay if you're going through something to put up those boundaries and nicely say, don't have space for that. But I do believe it is within all of us. And that's the self-power, is knowing that we have the self-power to reach out to a professional that is there for us. That's their job. And there are so many healers. Every guest on the show that I've had on the show, every guest I'm going to have on the show works with people in some way, shape, or form to help them transform. So you can always go back into the archives. A major thing that you just mentioned, and this might be controversial to some, but this is what I fully believe in my heart, is we were just discussing compassion, self-compassion, knowing when we have our own traumas, knowing when we have our own issues. Now, you and I are here. We're kind souls. We are loving individuals. We are not abusing power, I don't think, in any way. So as we find our compassion, as those around us find their self-love and their self-compassion, I do believe that it is for us to also recognize that the overarching issue of everything that's happening right now, every issue in the world, is people in power abusing that power because those human beings do not have that level of self-compassion. That's where it comes from. Greed, wanting to have power, oppression, it all stems from human beings that decided they were going to conglomerate into a group. I mean, that's what white supremacy is. It's a whole bunch of white men, mostly, could be women as well, but it is a whole bunch of people that lack that self-compassion. Otherwise, they would not be doing what they're doing. And as we wake up, I do feel that if we can open our hearts, not condone, not change, but understand that that is the root level of the issue.
I mean, thank you for bringing that up, because one of the things that I talk about is you've got to understand the pathology of what you are bucking against, whatever you're
Yes.
dealing with, right? Like before you can rise above it or flow around it, you got to understand what you're in. Okay. And I completely agree that like there's a lack of self-compassion because from my experience of self-compassion, I would actually never want to hoard resources and create desperation somewhere else. From everything I've seen of the world and what culture has taught me, high concentrations of desperate people are actually a public safety and a public health risk. It's not a good idea as a collective to have
Mm-hmm.
people be completely devastated and diminished and impoverished. But yet and still, look at how many people around the world globally we have that live off of $1 or less a day. There are some parts of the world where people will be in line for 2 days for an iPhone, and there are other parts of the world where people are in line for 2 days to possibly see the dentist at the free clinic has opened up. That should be weird. That should
It
be weird
is.
to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
That's weird. That doesn't make sense. That's not a good thing, you know? Um, I've been noticing a lot of hostile architecture lately. I don't know if you've noticed this. Like, and then by hostile architecture, I mean architecture outside of buildings that will keep someone who is without a home from being able to sleep outside the building.
Yeah.
There's like spikes sticking up, right? Or like things, these weird bars in places so that someone can't lie all the way down and go to sleep. And the fact that that's been our response to the situation of homelessness in urban areas, instead of trying to figure out how to actually provide housing to people so that no
Yeah.
one is without shelter, which is one of your basic human
Yeah.
needs.
And
Like,
how much
what
did
is the point? Right?
how
Like,
much did
what
it
is the
cost to
point?
do that, right? To
Right?
build
Like,
that building?
civilization, we're all giving
Yeah.
ourselves to civilization, and yet like we can't actually provide the basic human needs that a person actually is required to have in order to live and thrive. That should be weird. But it should
Yes.
also be weird to us that all the opportunities have been concentrated into certain areas too. Like, why don't we live in the countryside anymore? Did we have more human beings living in cities than have ever lived in cities in the entire history of humanity and modern history? That's not necessarily good. We still need the countryside. People shouldn't have to leave the countryside if they enjoy living there, if they enjoy their home. They shouldn't have to leave to go seek opportunity somewhere
Mm-hmm.
else. And then they go, we see this in other countries especially, they go and they still can't afford, they can't make the way, so now they're in slums, right? And the slums have been okay. We all see them. We know that they're there. We all have parts in our area, cities, that maybe it doesn't look like the slums, outside of Mumbai, but it still is an area of devastation and concentrated desperation. And we see it and we let it go, right? So again, this is us saying, this isn't working. This is not working. And one of the things that I really love about the energy right now is that, yes, like this conversation started because of race, police brutality, realizing that what people have been saying about the system and the over policing and the over budgeting to the police and the police taking so much of the city economy, we need to start thinking through that. But it actually has opened up the conversation about everything. I
Mm-hmm.
am seeing the conversations now about disability, about homelessness, about trans lives, about LGBT, about everything, and it's Pride Month too on top of that. Like everything has been converging all at once in a way that we can no longer sit there and say, well, I didn't know.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a coincidence. I don't
No.
think that's a coincidence. It is a great awakening, and I have been paying attention to who has been waking. and
Yes.
and it's a very interesting, conversation. And we're going into voting season, right? We're actually going into a time where people can actually use their power toward the vote. right? And I'm seeing other stuff where like they want the youth vote, but they don't want that youth voice. Well, you can't have one without the other. Okay.
Yeah.
And this generation is deciding they want something completely different. Like I'm tired. I am. Like I'm not gonna act like I'm not exhausted. I know, I'm having a great time talking to you. I'm reconciling a lot of the pain and the trauma that I have been experiencing, even within myself. I had some PTSD moments come up for me. The Amy Cooper, the situation in Central Park was actually very triggering for me. There was some PTSD inside of me that I did not realize that I had. And it came back up because I had experienced something very similar that I had pushed aside, right? So I did not really remember it until I saw that video. And alongside all of that is going on inside of me at the same time. And I'm working very hard to make sure that I go to sleep every night in gratitude so that I can wake up every morning joyous to be in my body. But one of the things that I have to admit is that the energy that's going on right now is not energy that I've ever seen, that I've ever felt, and that I ever thought that I would actually witness within my lifetime. It feels different. This moment feels different. The way that this came out globally, the way that so many people collectively came together, it feels different. And there is a Balinese term called taksu. I'm not an expert on this, but I've looked into it a little bit because I just love other concepts of human experience and expression. And taksu is a Balinese word for spiritual charisma. Like it's basically the spiritual charisma that is necessary in artistic expression to call the audience, the eyes of the audience, both human and divine, right? And so when I saw that haka that the Maori performed in New Zealand in front of the US consulate, when I saw, like the LGBT community and coming out and dancing in the streets and in their berets and in heels and just like spin and twirling and posing, doing voguing in the streets, when I saw people doing the Cuban shuffle, I felt like I was witnessing toxic. Like I felt like I was witnessing this thing, this Balinese term coming to life, like this, and also orenda, like this Huron term of the human will, your human will ability to actually use your life force, all the energy of your life force to create change in the physical world at will.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it felt like to me. And these are not necessarily American concepts, right? Orenda is, because that's actually from what we call the Americas. That's a Huron term, but these are not in the collective Westernized zeitgeist. But it's a very real thing, and this is part of why part of my work is so focused on expanding the stories that are available in the media, in this medium that we have for delivering stories, because it helps us find the healers and the guides and the teachers and the challenges and the collaborators and everybody that we need to get what we need individually based upon the experience we've had in this body to reach that next level, that higher level of consciousness. And the thing is that you're just not going to elevate your mind by sticking your head in the sand.
Yeah.
It don't work that way, So it is a very different time. And overall, I actually do believe that I am witnessing progress happen in my lifetime. And not to be cataclysmic about it, but like, I don't see how we can keep moving forward if it's not progress that I'm witnessing within my lifetime.
I believe that's why we're here. I don't think we can go back. And by the way, the definition of magic is to use your personal power to create change in your life and the world around you. I mean, it's not the fact that it's not a new term, that it is a term that you could research and study, means that this has been part of humanity this entire time.
Always.
This coming
Because you're able
together.
to,
Yeah.
it's not visible, but it's possible. You know, it's possible,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like part of it is that ability to see what is possible, even though it's not visible, and then use the life force to actually make it reality, right? And I mean, we'll have to have another thing where we talk just about like how much the people who restricted media did believe that it actually had magical powers to some extent, you know.
Yeah.
And if you remember, even like when that first movie was shown in France and there was the train moving toward people, people got up and ran out of the theater because there was no understanding at the time that they were not about to get run over by a train. Like it felt so real and so palatable. So that is part of why I say like this thing that we're using right now, this way that we're able to communicate globally, this way that we're able to actually like show things that are going on, injustice as well as joy, trauma as well as healing, all of this, I don't think it's a coincidence. We've been working our way to this moment the entire time. The
Absolutely.
entire time.
That was one thing I actually wanted to mention, was that I know for me, like we've talked about this, I know the last 8 years of my life have been dealing with like intense personal trauma and healing and childhood wounds, ancestral karma, you name it. And I'm not alone. So many women I know, so many men I know, so many humans I know have been going through this ascension. And I think all of us until this year knew something was coming, but we didn't know what. But we felt that there was a reason for this. This couldn't just be a coincidence that we're all going through this. And now we see the reason. Now we see the calling to humanity. We see our opportunity to serve. And I just love that you're saying it is not a coincidence. And this is my call and your call for everyone watching, that if that was you, if you were waking up over the last few years and wondering like, what is this about? What happened? What is my life meant to be? This is it. And for those of
Yes.
you that are watching that are just waking up now, you have a future to play in this as well. So I want to reiterate that this is our collective opportunity, our collective duty. And I want to say that in a way that it's not, I said this before in another session, that there is a difference between fate and destiny. Fate is a Black person coming in as a part of this system that's already created, where his ancestors were oppressed and now he's oppressed, and just sitting back and saying, no, okay, I'm not going to change anything. This is how it is. That's fate. Fate is the karmic shit that you come in with and you just say, this is the hand I was dealt. Destiny is actively having compassion and actively moving forward to make change and create a new world. And that is what every single human being here is being asked to do. That's why I love your book, Legacy. It's like, I love that. I love what you said. It's like continue. Yes.
Well, I mean, I was going to say, like, to go even back to what you were saying about, like all the stuff that people were going through, right? Like, I have been talking to some people. Someone hit me up that she's been reading the book during all of this, right?
Yeah.
Along with a couple of other things that she's reading. And she was just like, wow, like all this stuff is now coming together for me in a way that I don't think it ever would have in another space and time. And one of the things that she was saying that she's, basically moving into activism, around the beauty industry, which she's got, like a lot of insight about, and was, basically saying that, oh, like I was so messy. And I said, if I may, let's kind of maybe take a look at that. Were you actually messy? Like, yeah, I know we can call it messy, but when the seed bursts open, it looks messy, right? It's like you were probably blooming. And the blooming was all that mess that was qualifying you for where you are right now, right? Like, this is what I mean by the called become qualified, not necessarily the other way around. It's like you are qualified by the work, by the process, by the experience. There are people that I talk to that they speak on some of the most amazing things around healing through childhood abuse, the human trafficking, the rape, the other kinds of trauma. And the thing is that it's always very clear to me that they would not have the authenticity and the veracity, the authority to speak on it the way that they do if they had not experienced it. Like, the things that I speak on, I'm not speaking out of my butt, like, I lived it.
Yes.
The things that I haven't lived, I reference to other people. I try to give the floor and the platform to others in regards to that. But the stuff that I speak on, that I've experienced, I know that I've experienced it because it has contributed to my actual qualifications to be able to speak on it. This is not me just having hypotheticals, no, this is me able to look at when I was 7 years old. And my whole worldview got shifted because we got attacked because of our race as a family. And my parents they were forced to explain race to me because the neighbors had literally burned a cross on the lawn. And I had never had to think about that before like that. Because before, when microaggressions were going on around me, my family was there and they were sheltering me from it. So I was not fully understanding it. But when I witnessed a cross burning on the lawn of our new house, I had to understand what was going on. And my parents had to explain to me what they had experienced, what life was in this country for people born into bodies like mine, how this country has treated us most of the time. And from that moment forward, I had to start doing a lot of work, a lot of inner work as well as outer work around it, because it wasn't optional for me to just not think about it. And that was just the beginning of a lot of weird things that happened, and a lot of situations where I had to take agency over myself and exert my agency. But the fact that I even was able to do that or felt empowered to do that, that was something that I'm so grateful for. I got lucky. There are other people, they weren't as lucky as that. And they maybe didn't have parents like mine that were encouraging of them to express themselves that way. And my parents didn't do everything perfect, but they did enough to the point where I went ahead and I fought for myself, and not everyone gets that. And I can't knock that if they didn't get it. I feel like part of the reason why I occupy the space that I do is to advocate for those who have not gotten that opportunity, have not gotten that, kind of encouragement, are not in a situation where they feel safe enough to be able to go about things the way that I go about things. And then there are people who feel even safer than I feel, and they are able to go about things in a completely different way than I can go about it. So it's so many multiple layers to this waking up, being into your, in your power, moving through things, and I think so much of it is looking into yourself, constantly asking why. You got to ask why. And then you start to understand why, you get some hows in there. Okay, how am I going to, now I got some handle on the why. This is how I think I'm going to show up in this capacity. And keep having conversations with yourself about what you didn't see, what you didn't know, what you could have done differently, what you need to do moving forward, the kinds of people even that you need to cultivate around yourself so that you can keep fueling the energy, compassionate people around you to keep fueling the energy that you need to keep using this. It's always coming back to the compassion that you keep for yourself within the experience, so that you can keep putting that compassion out into the world to make this journey about more than just you.
That is right there. This journey it's not just about you. We are all having a human experience. It is a collective experience. It is impossible for it to be about us solely ever. And what I love that you said was the work, like if you're curious where to start, how do I start? I have this compassion. I want to help. I do believe that the best place to start is to look at your own life and ask yourself, what have I personally gone through? What traumas, what circumstances, what things have I gone through that have made me the person I am today? And that is the healing that goes along with that, is what you are most likely going to be going out into the world and helping other people with. If you were abused as a child, you're probably going to be working with children of abuse. If you are raped as a woman, you are most likely going to be looking into women's issues. Like there's so many different aspects of oppression and abuse of power that are happening right now. And I do hear people asking, where do I start? I'm overwhelmed. Start looking at yourself, just like you said. Those experiences had you, and myself included, with all of the things that have happened in my life, I had to look at, well, what is it that is creating that inner turmoil? And that usually is my own personal life. And that usually whatever it is that I am healing, for me, it was standing in my power. What am I doing right now? I'm teaching people to stand in their power. It was being a sensitive person that was told that, that lived in a masculine dominant world, that was told that I was weak. Well, that's something that I am now teaching people as well. It all comes back to our personal experiences, which is why I love that, because people are wondering, what is my lane? There's so many different lanes, but they're also looking at the external circumstances. Do I go protest? Do I do this? It's not really about the thing. It's about the why. Like you said, you might not know how yet until you start looking at the why and the what. What did I go through and why? And I believe that it usually comes down to why, because I came here to help fix that. Not fix, it's probably not the best word, but I came here to heal that.
Heal it, change it, maybe heal the ancestors, in regards to it, possibly, for some reason, your life force is here to work and move in that area.
Yes.
It's like, and the thing is that, as we keep seeing, and that's one reason why I spent so much time talking about the big, huge scope of this, is because it is it's a whole spider web of things. So the thing is that you don't have to be all over the whole spider web. That's impossible, right? It's like you pick your lane. Like one of the lanes that I picked was I wanted to specifically talk about media and representation in relation to media, how bodies show up on these screens that we look at all the time, and all this messaging that we receive throughout the day, this form of communication. That's what I chose to look at, because I was well versed in communication, and my education around it helped me inform how I wanted to use the things that I had gathered from personal experience in this particular space. I support what people do, the work people do in other areas, but I don't necessarily move in those areas the way they do, because they are actually leading the charge. They're at the helm of change, where in those areas that they concentrate on. So I do my best to be an ally to them, to be an accomplice, even if you will, to be a co-conspirator to go ahead and getting that
co-creator
out of our experience collectively as human beings. But I recognize that their energy, they're moving through it, like they in the way that it's bringing progress to the forefront, and I can support it without having to try to helm it. you know,
Yeah.
like, and that's
Yes.
the thing too, like a lot of people, they're trying to figure it out in the sense of they act like they're going to jump into the fray and helm something. You don't necessarily need to helm it. You need to say who is actually doing this, who has been doing it.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to actually show up in support of that. How can I amplify what they are doing? How can I raise their voice? How
Mm-hmm.
can I help spread the word about it? How can I support with whatever I can donate, time, funds, things of that nature? That's the work to do internally sometimes too. And sometimes for some people, just because of the way they process, they're going to have to go ahead and jump into the fray and then let the fray start to guide them toward where they're
Yeah.
supposed to end up. Right. You know, it's kind of like going to college, right? You don't know necessarily what your major is going to be, or you think you know what you're going to declare as your major. And then you start going through, you're like, I don't even want to do that. I want to do art history instead, you know? So
Yeah.
it's kind of like that too. And you have to give yourself, you know, some time with that. And just, again, start where you are. Here is also a direction, and where you are right now is a valid place to start. And you will learn, and you will become more qualified, and you might actually even realize that you're already qualified, you just had not connected the dot on exactly what that thing is supposed to be, how you're supposed to show up in that way, because you just hadn't been in those spaces before trying to show up that way. But once you actually step into that space, things will start to shift. Because
Yes.
here's the thing, you cannot separate the mind from the body. You can't separate the body from the environment. Okay. The body is a vessel. The body is a vessel. And that environment's culture and the context of that culture is part two of how you start to inform everything in the mind of how to think through what the body is experiencing within that environment, within that culture, within that context. So sometimes you just have to go ahead and step into the environment and start to let the environment, signals from the environment, tell you, inform you, guide you, move you, help you answer that call to compassion.
And you know what you're describing is living in your divine feminine. We all have it. The earth is pushing that energy right now for men and women. For those of you that might have not seen any of my other episodes, we have both energies. We both have divine
Yes.
masculine. And for so long, we have all lived in that I'm going to decide what needs to happen based on my thoughts, based on what society tells me. And we are all now being asked to go inside and look at our internal compass and our intuition. And you're describing that process perfectly, is dive in, step forward, take some action, move, and then wait for the next guided step. That is actually the human process. That's how we were designed to work. And
And that's how synchronicity opens up,
yes.
right? Like that's how you actually put yourself in a position to actually have moments of synchronicity. It's not sitting there waiting for everything to feel certain and feel completely 100% secure. And okay, now that I know, I'm pretty sure how A is going to go to B, now I'm going to move. No,
Mm-hmm.
like I've heard people, oh my God, these times are so chaotic. All times are chaotic. Oh my God, these times are so uncertain. All times are uncertain. We just lull ourselves into a sense of certainty so that we don't freak out every 5 minutes in human angst about being alive in
We
the
we
world.
we are all living in under the illusion that we are in control of anything.
Right.
It's an
You are not
illusion.
really in control of things like that. There's stuff that you have some control over, but you don't have control over whether or not it's going to rain. Okay. Like you can't
Yeah.
control that. That is, again, that's the queen mother. That's Mother Nature. She's the one deciding that, not us, you know? So is you got to basically like let a lot of that certainty go, learn to actually find power in uncertainty, go ahead and lean into it. Lean into actually the fact of recognizing your gifts and your talent, like what you actually innately have, what you maybe have even been honing and harnessing this entire time, developing through your life and your work and your career and everything else, all the ways you've shown up, and start to realize that you'll be able to figure it out. Okay, like the
Yes.
thing, whatever it is that pops up, as long as it does not kill you, you'll be here and you'll be able to figure it out. And if you can kind of lean into that and just relax and be like, okay,
Mm.
Then next thing you know, you're going ahead and you're moving in the space, you're opening yourself up to your intuition, you're looking at the signals, and boom, next thing you know, you have a random conversation with someone because something's telling you to trust this person with this information, or just share this with them. And they actually have the solution to your problem that you were just trying to randomly
Yeah.
think through. And you would have never known if you had not had that conversation. And that is cultivating synchronicity in your life.
And you were guided, you're intuitively guided to speak to that person. You felt an alignment there. That is the beautiful thing. I'm going to end with this. I know we could go on for hours. I do see a question. I'll address that in a minute. But unfortunately, I have another podcast to be on today. I actually get to be a guest.
Oh, yay.
Yes, absolutely love this conversation. And I love what you just said is that that is how we create a collective consciousness, is by using our intuition to be guided to, we are all here working together. No one's working in a bubble. Every human being is meant to interact with certain other human beings to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. And I want to encourage everyone to open up, take the time, self-care, have self-compassion, take a step back if you need to, until you can take a look inside and find that inner compass that is guiding you. And then you will know what steps to take. Then you do have to be back out into the world. You do eventually have to step back out. We can't live in hiding, but you don't have to dive out there with zero plans. You can actually take a step back and ask yourself, feel into it. What is it that I really need to do? I was really feeling like it is not for me to go out there and riot at the moment. There's other things that I could do. And that's all intuitively guided. And that is the world that we are co-creating together. And if we are intuitively guided, if we are living in compassion, the name of the show is using compassion to fuel action. The action is then guided by the compassion, by our heart, by our intuition, and we are more likely to take actions that benefit everyone else and not just and including ourselves. We're not taking ourselves out of the picture. When the collective is happy, everyone's happy, including us. So I want to ask you, I know we have another minute before we say goodbye to everyone here. Are there any last words? We're obviously going to have you on the show again, and we'll have a 5-hour episode, but are there any last words of advice and wisdom that you want to share to this group and anyone watching? It could be anything.
Whew. I think probably, I'll end with this. Is actively work on developing curiosity about other people's experience. Like, so much of what we have been talking about in the media, it's not showing up this way. It's not necessarily being discussed this way, especially on political levels. But what a lot of the ignorance or the lack of insight or I didn't know is that we have usually a lot of times cultivated a lack of curiosity about other people. And I don't mean curiosity like I'm going to go to the zoo. I mean genuine, legitimate, human curiosity about the life of another human being. And I think that if you actually start to be curious about other people's experiences, you will not just seek out just their trauma. Because this is one thing that I really am, be hypersensitive about right now. Do not just consume of people's collective culture in terms of the trauma that they have been surviving through. Because the trauma is not the story. The trauma does not define them. Okay, so don't just look at how they've been surviving and thriving. Also look at joy. Okay, and don't just consume people in their death. Okay, and their sorrow and their pain, but also look at their joy. And don't just think that the joy is how they show up in the most excellent ways, like the highest levels of what we think of as success and whatnot and everything. No, like look at people all the way down. Be curious and see that everyone is complex. no group of people is a monolith. And I think that will also help fuel the compassion and the call to compassion.
I love you so much. Thank you so much for being on my show. We're definitely going to connect. If you guys want to find out more about Joy, and I think everyone wants to right now, I'm going to put all of her links below. And we will have her on the show again. If you enjoyed this conversation, we do this live every Friday, Tea and Magic, Friday, 12 p.m. Pacific time in the Magic Grove, which is our Facebook group. I also post these videos on my YouTube channel under Kristen Nettopack. You can just search Tea and Magic. And if you're watching this on my YouTube, come on over to Facebook because we'd love to have you here live. Thank you guys so much for watching. Joy, it was a pleasure to have you. And I love you so much.
I love everybody. You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.